Hello, my name is Robert Baines. I am the President and CEO of the NATO Association of Canada, a charitable endeavor dedicated to informing Canadians about the value of security and the importance of NATO. NATO is not something that most Canadians think about on a daily basis, and that's a great thing. We don't have to always worry about our security. However, it is important that Canadians realize that there is so much effort and constant work that goes into providing our security and maintaining a global rules-based international order. This is not something that happens naturally, but has required decades of work to get us where we are, and that the maintenance of that order is Canada's #1 foreign policy goal. Today, we're going to have a wonderful discussion about the Pacific and the Indo-Pacific and its place in the security vision of Canada and how Canada can help make sure that it's more secure. Security is indivisible. So when we have insecurity somewhere else around the world, it is going to affect Canada. We are not just some wonderful country far away from everything that is not going to be affected by global affairs. So we have to be aware of that and to make sure that we're paying attention. That is one of the NATO Association's prime goals, is to make sure our citizens are informed and paying attention. We put on events all year. We publish articles on social media, and we put on events like this online. So I hope you will join us on social media and continue in the discussion. Right now, I'm going to introduce Matt Thomas, who's had a long association with the NATO Association and is now representing the Canadian International Council, which is co-hosting this event. We're absolutely thrilled with that. Matt is co-chair of the Canadian International Council, National Capital Branch, and the Asia-Pacific Study Group. He's a strategic advisor with the Department of Public Safety and has published several papers with the NATO Association on NATO, in the Indo-Pacific with the NATO Association itself and the University of Toronto. Matt, it's wonderful to have you as such a strong partner. Please introduce our moderator and say hello.
Thank you very much, Robert. I appreciate your kind words. Yeah, we are very, very happy to be here. So just a little bit about the Canadian International Council. We are a national, nonpartisan, membership-based charitable organization with a mandate to foster dialogue and engage Canadians in shaping Canada's place in the world. Through 19 different branches and over 1,200 members, the CIC brings together experts, thought leaders, decision makers, young Canadians, and individuals from the public sector, among others, to discuss global issues and develop foreign policy initiatives. The National Capital Branch, based in Ottawa, where we are operating from, is one of the CIC's most active branches and includes a number of regional and thematic study groups, including the Security Intelligence Study Group and the Asia-Pacific Study Group, of which Robert has noted I am one of the several co-chairs. So very pleased to be here. We encourage you all to join the CIC and participate in the numerous activities and events that the branch organizes. If you are not based in Ottawa, please reach out to your local branch. We would love to have you. If you're looking for ways to reach out, we have a website, or you can reach out to me directly. My name is Matthew Thomas, and you can find me on the CIC National Capital Branch website. I'd also like to thank our fantastic speakers, and as well introduce Valerie Keyes, our moderator. So a little bit about Valerie is that Valerie has a 35-year career, 35 years experience in the federal public service, having previously served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 13 years. A graduate of the University of Toronto and the Royal Military College of Canada, she is the first and only Canadian to receive the Master of Science in Leadership from the Olin School of Business in Washington, at Washington University in St. Louis. Prior to retirement in 2021, Valerie spent most of her public service career in national defense, in such diverse domains as government relations, humanitarian policy, operations, Western Hemisphere defense relations, all with a backdrop of security and intelligence. She has also served as special advisor to the British Army on peacekeeping policies and doctrine, as well as ethos and leadership. Valerie is now the president and CEO of GTM Leadership Matters, a consulting firm that specializes in leadership training and education for government and private sector employees. Valerie, thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate this, and I'll leave it to you to take it away.
Thank you, Matt. I didn't realize that I'd sent a longer version of my bio to you. I should have just sent the one sentence that's on.
Not at all.
When I retired from the public service and when I announced that I had over 46 years of public service and was now moving to public service with a small p, small s, I figured that was a good way to transition into a new life. But so thank you for that, Matt. Everyone, welcome to this afternoon for the presentations on. We've already got an indication of just how important this subject is and Canada's role, not just in NATO, which springs to mind perhaps more readily than Canada's role, especially when we're on this side of the continent, than Canada's relations with the Indo-Pacific area, which is an incredibly important part of the world. And one only needs to look at news headlines, whether it's in The Economist or in the local newspapers or just online, just to see how much we should be paying attention to what's happening in what we used to refer to as the Far East. And I think I'm dating myself when I describe it as such. I'm delighted to be able to introduce our two speakers this afternoon. His Excellency Ambassador Kanji Yamanuchi and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Robert Oliphant. Ambassador Yamanuchi has had a long and distinguished career. I point out that my career is still slightly longer than yours, Your Excellency, but you'll catch up soon. The ambassador has been here in Ottawa since May of 2022. And before that, he was in New York at the as Consul General of Japan in New York, and no stranger to the North American continent. Apart from his postings in Tokyo, he was also in Washington for a number of years as the Minister for Economic Affairs and holds a degree in political science from the Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. Welcome, Ambassador, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. The Honorable Robert Oliphant, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, has been the Member of Parliament for Don Valley West since, I think I'm right in saying, since 2015. And he's served in various important roles with the government, with the several ministers of foreign affairs. You've outlasted several of them, I see, from Ministers Friedland, Champagne, and Marc Garneau, who, of course, along with me, is a graduate of the Military College, so we have an affinity right there. He's also the Vice Chair of the Canada-Africa Parliamentary Association, which brings a slightly different twist to what we're talking about today. Mr. Oliphant or Dr. Oliphant, I should say, is an ordained United Church minister and has served congregations in Newfoundland, Quebec, Yukon, and Toronto prior to starting on a political career. So welcome to you too, sir, and glad to have you both here. So for this presentation this afternoon, I'm going to ask each of you to talk for a few minutes just as scene setters of what we're going to talk about. I have then a list of questions that we can use for the basis of our discussion, and then we can build on the discussion from there. So if I might turn first to Your Excellency, Ambassador Yamanuchi, if you would like to say a few words to start us off.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Valerie. I'm so honored to be here today. And as you just mentioned, and I just arrived May last year. So it's been about a year. Day by day, I discover something new. And I thought I knew something about Canada, but the more I learn this country, the more I realize how much I don't know about this great country. So ever after my arrival here, I just realized this is a huge country, 27 times as big as the size of Japan. Ontario alone, 2.8 times as big as Japan. So I decided to visit every province, 10 provinces and 3 territories as soon as possible. So far, I'm proud to tell you that I have been to 9 provinces. I met their premiers and lieutenant governors and met people down there. Then I just realized each province or each local community has its own history and culture and its own characters. And basically, they like Japan. I mean, they are very, very friendly to Japan. And so it's a great, great asset for us to expand our relation between Canada and Japan. And also this coming June, Global Affairs of Canada will organize a northern tour to visit various places in 3 territories. So I'm going to participate that. So I'm fulfilling my sort of first determination to visit every corner of this country. So then having said that, today's meeting is very, very timely, and it's very important. So Robert, you just mentioned that NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So basically deals with the European affairs. But unfortunately, now you have to think of the Asia. This is a mixed feeling. I'm very welcome this kind of meetings. We meet East meets West kind of things, but simply because today's geopolitics require that. So in a sense, last year for its first time, the Prime Minister Kishida participated NATO summit as an Asian leader. And also from tomorrow, NATO foreign ministers meeting will be held, and Foreign Minister Hayashi will be joining it. And Japanese public supported. That means the situation in Europe is very much connected to the situation in Asia. So the Prime Minister Kishida said it last year, today's Ukraine might be tomorrow's Asia. So that is not just a word. We see kind of the danger, we see the concerns, and we see so many things happening in a very negative way. So I think this is very, very important for Canada and Japan to sit together and talk together and work together for the betterment of the world. And in that context, today's meeting is very, very significant and meaningful. And also we mean the Japanese government welcome the issuance of the Indo-Pacific strategy by Canadian government. It's first in its history to formulate the strategy as an integral part of Canadian whole strategy, this Indo-Pacific strategy. And that will coincide our national strategy. So this is very timely for both of us to talk about the Indo-Pacific situation today. But anyway, thank you so much for having me here today. Arigato.
Thank you. And if I can turn the floor over to Mr. Oliphant now.
Thank you, Valerie and Robert and Matthew for organizing this, and Your Excellency. You will find that I will call you Kanji, and if I call you Your Excellency when we meet, it's because I forgot your name. So I will do my best to always call you Kanji. It is really a pleasure to meet you here, and I look forward to seeing you in Ottawa in person. I think the relationship that Canada has with Japan is profound. It is incredibly important to both our countries, and it has been obviously the object of much attention and affection over the last just even in the last year or two, with 6 ministerial visits, with a Prime Minister visit from Japan, as well as numbers of officials that have gone back and forth as we work together on the 6 Shared Priorities Action Plan in developing our bilateral relationship. I also think it's really always wonderful when the Japanese ambassador gets to discover Canada, and because I always remind them that it's more than Banff. It's more than Anne of Green Gables in PEI. It's more than the Northern Lights in Northwest Territories, and it's more than Niagara Falls, the sort of 4 hotspots for Japanese tourism. We really look forward to expanding that tourism because people-to-people ties are important. My background in the United Church of Canada also goes back to a significant relationship with Japanese Canadians, and the diaspora is rich and important to Canada. So we have a multifaceted relationship with our diaspora here in Canada, as well as tourism, both directions, and economic and commercial activity. The area of security, of course, is something that is emerging. I believe it's tomorrow, Finland will formally join NATO, and Canada welcomes both Finland and Sweden to the NATO alliance as new members. NATO needs to continue to expand to meet ongoing challenges. And obviously right now, the challenge with Ukraine, with Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, has put pressures on Northern Europe like we have not seen since World War II. And so welcoming both Finland and Sweden to NATO is one of Canada's top priorities, as we see ourselves as an Arctic nation, a Nordic nation, and one that bridges the Atlantic and the Pacific. And we're not unique, obviously, with the United States as our large neighbor, but in the North Atlantic, I actually think that Canada has a unique place to play as a Pacific nation, as an Atlantic nation, as an Arctic Ocean nation. And so we are engaged in security issues in all three fora. Our special relationship, obviously, was formalized more concretely with our 6 Shared Priorities Action Plan in 2022, which has really provided some tremendous momentum. And our shared priorities and the ministerial visits have only enhanced that. But also with the release of our Indo-Pacific strategy, and it's interesting because I have been the parliamentary secretary now for 4 ministers. I've also had 3 Japanese ambassadors. And one of the reasons that that's been important is each one has asked, when will the IPS, the Indo-Pacific strategy, be ready? And what was good about that for me was that Japan eagerly, at least appears to eagerly want to have Canada as a Pacific partner. And so the development of the IPS has been incredibly important in our staking out our interest in the Asia Pacific. It is absolutely incredibly important for us. So it's not only a historic relationship, it's a very much a current and a present and a future relationship. And the IPS is a whole of government approach. Obviously, it has a commercial background. It has trade. It has people movement and migration issues. It also has a very strong defense and security portion. Really, that is an all-encompassing look at Canada's relationship with the whole region. The action plan has a bilateral roadmap to advance our shared policies. The IPS has a multilateral approach where Canada is seeking relationships with all parts of the Indo-Pacific. My mother always taught me that she should never have favorites in her family, but obviously Japan has a favored position in Canada's future. We have strong ties on the economic side. We have interests in issues like critical minerals. We have issues in food security, energy security, and defense and security, as the situation is constantly fluid in the Asia Pacific area. We're very, very aware of this. And just recently, we had President Biden visit Ottawa from the United States, obviously March 23rd, 24th, and we announced our extension of the Operation Neon mission until April 2026, which has surveillance operations to monitor and sanction evasion activities around the Korean Peninsula. So we have Korea and the difficulties with North Korea, South Korea, that tension in our sights. We have the tension in the South China Sea and East China Sea, and China's increased aggression in the world is in our sights. We are not naive about this, and we are looking for friends. So we are developing our friends with ASEAN, with moving to a richer relationship, and we are engaging in the North region with key partners, especially Japan, on security and defense arrangements. I'll just close by saying a few weeks ago I was in Brussels for meetings, both European Union meetings as well as NATO meetings. When we're looking at NATO, Canada is constantly reminding NATO of our security interests, which extend beyond the Atlantic and Europe. Canada has, as Robert said, the security issues are, Robert or Matthew, I'm not sure, I think it was Robert, security issues are indivisible. And when there is a security issue in any part of the world, every part of the world needs to be concerned. So we work on the rules-based international order, multilateral engagement, and security alliances and friendships that become very important. And Japan and Canada have a very important future ahead, and we look forward to building on that. And we'll discuss more about that today. Long opening remarks, but I need to tell you they're about 1/4 of the remarks that were given to me by the department, and I put my own flavor in them. So there you go. Thanks, Valerie. Back to you.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is I have a series of questions here that I'm going to put, and some of them are more obviously directed to one or the other. Most of them are we'd be looking for comments of from both of you, and some of them will directly answer some of the points or address some of the points that you have both made in your introductory remarks. And so the first one I want to pose to you is, you've already mentioned the importance of NATO, the various alliances. Mr. Oliphant, you just mentioned ASEAN, which is an organization near and dear to my heart because I was heavily involved in the disaster relief aspects of it more years ago than I care to remember, but still it was an incredibly important initiative. And so what I would like to pick up on now is your specific ideas on your views on Japan-Canada cooperation in these contexts, whether it's a plurilateral, multilateral, but particularly the multilateral through the ASEAN regional fora, through the Pacific Islands groups, and so on, as well as the one that springs to mind, of course, regularly is the G7, which I don't think either of you has yet mentioned, but I think is a very important because of our relationships based on economics. And perhaps, Ambassador, I could ask you to start off with that.
Thank you very much, Valerie. You were right. So Canada and Japan share a lot. We share the basic value like human rights, democracy, rule of law, and the market economy. And also the Canada and Japan are member of G7. And also we're the member of TPP and also APEC and others. So there are so many ways to work together for Japan and Canada in this area, both bilateral and multilateral. And also so many things are going on in Asia Pacific. So we welcome the Canadian sort of assertive role to make sure that this Indo-Pacific region, which might be very, very sensitive, but that this region be more stable and more prosperous. In that context, we welcome the Canadian intention to participate IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. And the Japanese government mentioned that we welcome the Canadian participation to that part. And though I do understand President Biden also mentioned his support for Canada to play more role in the IPEF like that. So I think there are so many ways for Japan and Canada to work together here. And one thing I would like to mention about that is last October, when Foreign Minister Jolie paid official visits to Japan, where she and her counterpart, Foreign Minister Hayashi, issued the action plan for 6 priority areas, which is a very, very important step forward for both of us. And at that occasion, the Foreign Minister Jolie, and actually I accompany her to visit the Yokosuka base near Tokyo. That is the headquarters of the United Nations the action to monitor and to watch that the North Korea, to prevent North Koreans ship-to-ship transfer, which is being prohibited by the United Nations Security Council. So I saw enormous sort of coordination and joint action by 9 countries, including US, Japan, Canada, and South Korea, and France, and UK, and Australia, etc. So I see enormous opportunities and the potential for Canada to play a role in this part, not only bilateral, but also multilateral. Thank you.
Mr. Oliphant?
Sure, and Kanji, I think you're hitting the mark. I want to say that Canada is really looking forward to and welcoming the presidency of the G7 by Japan in this coming year. I think, and it's not coincidental because I think we worked hard on our priority areas, but our joint action plan, I think, is very much in line with and supports Japan's G7 priorities coming up in the current year. Including the safeguarding of the international rules-based order, promoting economic security, as well as nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, which are key. Japan's leadership on that, and let's be very honest, as a victim of the nuclear war, Japan's leadership on that is extremely important to keep a peaceful world and nuclear non-proliferation. I think also we recognize, and you talk about how vast Canada is. It is a vast country, 27 times the size of Japan, but we're a small population. And as a small population country, we have learned that multilateral activity is critical for us. So we join. We're part of the G7 and the G20. We're also part of the Commonwealth and La Francophonie. We're also looking for extended engagement, as I said, at ASEAN, and we work in the OAS. So we recognize that the way we get our security, our economic security, our prosperity, and it's things like CPTPP, where we recognize that we have to expand and diversify our trade relationships, and we need to do that in a predictable world. So this is something that to have a predictable world, you have to have a secure world. To have a secure world, you need a combination of alliances and allegiances that create safety zones and ensures that the bullies of our world will not engage against any one of us, because an injury to one of us is an injury to all of us. And that's the way we need to work on our world. I think also, part of our priorities that we developed really came out of the free and open Indo-Pacific work of Japan. Your strategy, which you began in I think 2016, re-engaging in it this year. And we see a synergy there between Canada and Japan, our IPS, and your free and open region, of saying, how do we keep the region open but also secure, and recognize the vulnerabilities that we all have when bully countries engage, and so we are stronger together.
Yes, if I may, I would just like to add the one thing about the G7 leaders meeting, which will be held next month in Hiroshima. The choice of venue itself tells a lot, because Hiroshima is hometown of Prime Minister Kishida, and we face the reality today. But he never gave up the ideal of the nuclear disarmament and nuclear proliferation. And this is very timely, because now and then we've been hearing Russia suggesting that the use of nuclear weapons in this Ukraine crisis, and that never be accepted. And as a G7, as its unity and solidarity to show the world that significance of the nuclear disarmament, because if the 7 leaders and other guests are standing in front of that dome, it's a clear message to the world, and I think that is very important. And also, this G7 is a very, very important for us, because it's only G7 held in Asia. So G7 covers all over the world. Yes, we are facing the Ukraine crisis, so we will talk about Ukraine. But at the same time, it is very coincide with today's topic of Indo-Pacific. G7 Hiroshima will be the great venue for world leaders to talk about the Indo-Pacific situation. And on top of that, I just want to mention, when Prime Minister Kishida came to town, January, he had a very good meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau. And it is very, very, what can I say? I was very honored that Prime Minister Trudeau mentioned he will do everything to support Kishida to make this G7 summit in Hiroshima be successful. So that is a true word from his bottom of the heart. And I think that is a true testimony of the friendship between 2 leaders. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Valerie, I might add, just to add into that one, while our eyes are on Russia and even its activity perhaps in Belarus with respect to nuclear armament, we're not taking our eyes off North Korea. And we're extremely aware of the threat posed by North Korea and its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs. Unprecedented missile launches from North Korea, including, ones that flew over Japan last year in October, one that landed in your exclusive economic zone. If they up this program, Canada will be part of international community that condemns it, and we will continue to monitor the situation closely with other allies. But we are looking at Russia. we're also watching North Korea closely. So it is all of us would be affected by that.
Yes, sorry, just one word. And I really, we really appreciate the Canadian sort of commitment to this North Korean affairs. The saying it is easy, but you're doing your action, and especially so far, 2 frigates were dispatched.
And we're going to 3.
I know, but let me say it. And 2 up to yesterday. Then there is 2 out of 5 frigates on the Pacific side. So sending simultaneously 2 frigates to the same spot far away from Canada out of 5 means a lot, because you usually use for the repair and maintenance one, and for the practice one, and for the emergency. That means dispatchment of 2 frigates from Pacific side is the best you could do. And on top of that, based upon your Indo-Pacific strategy, you decided, and actually you dispatched additional frigate, Montreal, from Halifax. That is a true commitment and action tells a lot. We really thank you.
Good.
Well, while we're on the subject of North Korea, just as it's come up, we might as well jump right into that right now. The recent Japan-South Korea summit and announcements to improve ties has been applauded by many, including Canada and the US. And what do you see this developing further? And what role could Canada help play in this whole issue? Beyond just keeping it at the forefront and making sure that it just doesn't slip into the background, as we all are aware of what the dangers that North Korea poses to the security of not just of the Indo-Pacific area, but to all of us. And perhaps, Ambassador, if I could just ask you to follow on from your remarks that you started on just now.
Okay, from myself? Thank you very much for asking our relation to South Korea. And as you may know, I was stationed in South Korea as a political counselor about 20 years ago. And actually, I was dispatched to the North Korea as a head of the advanced team to prepare the Prime Minister Koizumi's first ever visit to North Korea. Then I had many, many good friends there. And from the very beginning, and Japan and South Korea shared a lot. We shared their basic values like human rights, rule of law, democracy, market economy. And also South Korea and Japan are both allies of the United States. And Canada, and for Korea and Japan is, I think, 2nd or 3rd largest trade partner. And for Japan, South Korea is also the 3rd largest trade partner. And both businesses are so interdependent and they do businesses in both sides. Nevertheless, as you may know, we do have the very sensitive and complicated issues. And from time to time, that complicated issues overshadows the entire relation between our 2 countries. And in the past few years, we were under that kind of a heavy crowds. But thanks to the leadership of new President of South Korea and also Prime Minister Kishida, now Japan and South Korea are showing the world our ability and our willingness to solve those complicated problems and also to work together for the betterment of the world. So I dearly welcome this decision, and also the latest leaders meeting between South Korea and Japan so showed the great improvement. And I think this is so important for Japan and South Korea, and also for the all like-minded countries and allies like the United States and Canada. And I think there are so many things we can work together for the betterment of that part of the world. And South Korea and Japan share all those issues like North Korea or China and other things. So I think that there is great room for both of us to work together. And also in that sense, Canada and South Korea share a lot. And we are also located in this Pacific Ocean. We are neighbor only separated by the ocean called by South Pacific Ocean. So I do think that there will be a great room for both of us, 3 of us, or other countries to work together for the betterment of the world. Thank you.
And I would just add, Canada welcomes this conversation that continues and gets deeper and richer. We are very aware of old wounds. We're very aware of old hurts. We're very aware of the hard work of reconciliation at any time. And Canada would always welcome playing any role we could, but we're also respectful of South Korea and Japan working through this process. And what we have seen in these very recent months and the last very short period is a recognition in that neighborhood, in those geographic partners, that their future is bound together in so many ways, economically, socially, culturally, and security, and that Canada only wants to be supportive of finding ways to ensure that old wounds are healed, and that the future, that our eyes are looking on the future, and so it is very important. As we look both at the increased aggressiveness of China, we look to Japan and South Korea for help with that. Japan and South Korea understand China profoundly and have coexisted in that neighborhood for a long time. And so Canada will often need help in understanding China from those two partners. I will let you in on a little secret, Ambassador, that over the last several years as parliamentary secretary, whenever I've met with the ambassador from Japan, I make sure I meet with the ambassador from South Korea within 24 hours and vice versa. I have always made sure that both countries will recognize that they're both important to us, and we are invested in peace in the region. And we know that we'll have more peace if those your two countries will continue to work together. We don't engage directly on those issues; it's not our place. But we're always willing to help if we're asked. That's where we're at.
And Mr. Oliphant, if I can just follow up with one quick question on that. We still have a Canadian military presence in South Korea. Do you foresee that continuing on into the future?
That's outside of my area of capacity. I think we would have to have Department of National Defense here to talk about that. So I won't wade into that because I'm just not familiar with it. What I would say is, as I look at the Indo-Pacific strategy, we're offering more Canadian military defense presence in the region, not less. The additional frigate, the engagement, both, and a little bit more in the northern areas than in the southern areas. But we do have concerns in the southern areas as well about aggression. We're just a little bit more focused right now on the north, but we have allies obviously in the south with Australia, with New Zealand. Those are important partners. The United States is covering both areas. Canada sometimes has to target our activity, and right now we're looking at the Strait and as well aggression from North Korea. Those are key priorities. So I can't comment on whether or not we will continue our military presence there. All I can say is when I, as an outsider, look at the IPS, I don't see less presence. I see, as the ambassador said, we can't have just words. We have to have expenditure, and that expenditure is about involvement. So we're going to be around, but I'll defer on the direct question.
Fair enough. While we're talking about what Canada does do in that part of the world, there is one group in that part of the world from which Canada's been excluded, and that's the AUKUS, the Australia, UK, and US grouping that was recently announced. And there was a big meeting of the three partners. I believe it was just last week. Canada's not part of that group. What are the implications for Canada and the relations with both those three countries, but more importantly in this context, with the other regional allies, particularly with Japan, with Canada being excluded from the AUKUS group? I'll start with Mr. Oliphant, if I might.
Yeah. And I don't see it as an exclusion. And I know I've read some commentary and some media reports calling it that we were excluded. The reality is AUKUS plays an important role and Canada welcomes that role. But it is largely a defense role around nuclear-powered submarines that are working in a procurement plan. And there are some regional issues that obviously the United States and the UK and Australia are sharing together, particularly around procurement, but other issues as well. We welcome it. We do not feel excluded. We feel that we have important alliances with all three of those countries. We were pretty key and critical on the trade side with the UK in working out their admission into the CPTPP. It's an important step forward for the UK. Obviously, our defense policy, our security policy is intimately tied with the United States, more than just NORAD, but it's the only joint command in the world. So we have an ongoing important relationship with the United States, also bilateral as well as through NATO. And with Australia, they're a Commonwealth partner, they're a trading partner, and we engage with all three of them. So honestly, we welcome it as something which can add some security to the region. I don't feel excluded. I feel that we welcome the partnership, and we'll continue to work with them and monitor them. It's not something we applied to get into and weren't chosen. It was an agreement that they were procuring submarines, and they went ahead with some collateral damage, I would say, as they did it. No, it's no secret about France's opinion on what happened with procurement. And for our sake, we're watching closely, we're engaged, and we'll continue to be. It's one more important alliance. We have alliances that the United States and UK and US are not in, and we'll continue to focus perhaps more on the north.
Ambassador, do you have any?
I echo
comment?
yes, thank you, Valerie. I just echo what Robert said. I think the excluded is a bit, what can I say, it's not appropriate word to describe this situation. Japan is not a member of AUKUS, but we don't feel like we are excluded. We are refused. We never thought that way. Because we share the very basic strategy or vision, like a free and open Indo-Pacific. The United States shared, Canada shared, we shared, and the UK. And also there are so many ways to work for the purposes to realize free and open Indo-Pacific. And so Japan is the Quad member, and also we have a strong alliance with the United States, and we've been working with, say, South Korea, or Canada, or Australia, or New Zealand in that way. So I think this is very important to make sure that we share the goal, or we share the vision. And so I think that is very, very important. But having said that, I heard the Guardian, the newspaper, March 28th, New Zealand Defense Minister Andrew Little suggests that he is considering, New Zealand is considering joining the second pillar of the AUKUS. But that is still their decision. And basically, to my understanding, AUKUS is something about the nuclear submarine. That is a whole essential part of it. Unless Canada has its own ideas to go for it, which I don't think likely. So talking about this AUKUS is a bit different. There are so many ways for Canada can do to contribute to free and open Indo-Pacific.
Thank you. When you both have I've hit on the various areas of cooperation between Canada and Japan, and we do have the formalized Canada-Japan 6 shared priorities, which cover some of the areas we've already talked about: the rule of law, peacekeeping and humanitarian operations, health security, which of course has been very much to the forefront over the last couple of years, energy security, free trade, and everybody's favorite, climate change. And how do you see these areas developing, and how do we establish priorities for them? And are there areas that are missing from this list that we might want to add in the future? Ambassador, perhaps I could start with you.
Yeah, thank you very much for asking this action plan for contributing to free and open Indo-Pacific, which contains its priority areas. And actually, this paper was issued, as I just mentioned, last October when Foreign Minister Jolie paid official visits to Japan. But actually, discussion or just negotiations, how to formulate this action plan, started more than a year ago. And this is a kind of the crystal so clear agreement between two governments, whole government. And 6 priority areas covers almost every important areas, starting from the Operation Neon to address North Korea, or the information protection agreement between our two countries, and so many, and also the carbon neutral kind of things. So I think first thing first, implementation of this action plan is so important. Now, actually, the other day I was talking with my friends of ambassadors and high commissioners from Asian countries. They are also, they all welcome the Canadian Indo-Pacific strategy. And at the same time, they are eager to see the actual actions. And so this action plans includes all those important elements, which is stipulated in the Canadian Indo-Pacific strategy and also the Japanese national strategy. So first thing first, we will implement all those things. And especially I put emphasis on this information protection agreement, which will be the great basis for further cooperation in terms of the intelligence and other areas, national security related areas. We can expand our cooperation based upon this information protection agreement. So this is very important. And other part would follow through. And also we should and we can expand our areas of cooperation for this Indo-Pacific region. But that would follow the implementation first. Thank you.
And I will add to that, you know, everything, I will echo everything the investor said, but I'm old enough, I think we're all old enough to remember Venn diagrams in, you know, learning. I don't even know that kids learn these anymore, but when I see our Indo-Pacific strategy and I see the action plan, the bilateral action plan, there's a tremendous overlap. And I think in some ways, the negotiations, the conversations around the shared priority action plan fed into the Indo-Pacific strategy in a really profound way. And as the ambassador said, we started on that under Minister Garneau, and Minister Motegi was the two then foreign ministers started scratching out on paper what those 6 priorities would look like. They fed into the Indo-Pacific strategy, and both have, there's an interplay, an overlap that I think it becomes quite important. Not everything is in the 6 priorities, obviously, but when you take the 6 priorities and add it to the Indo-Pacific strategy, you see things like oceans and fisheries, which come in to be something very important to both our countries, and about respecting international rule-based order on fisheries, and looking at the effect of climate change on food security and how we do that together. So I think that it's still a work in progress. The Minister Jolie, and I need to give Minister Jolie a little shout out right now, not just because she's my boss as the minister, but because the Indo-Pacific strategy has her stamp on it. And as the ambassador said, I have never actually seen a Canadian foreign policy or strategy that has been so well received. Domestically, in Canada, coast to coast, people get what we're trying to do. It's robust, and it has well over $2 billion of commitments and spending. It has security, as well as climate, as well as trade, as well as people-to-people ties. It's got education, it's got research, it's got so many parts to it, but it is still being implemented. So we are getting appropriations now for it. We will continue to build on the Indo-Pacific strategy. And luckily, our shared priorities with Japan undergirds it. They really go hand in hand. I suspect, as with anything, things will evolve over, say, a 4 or 5 year period where needs change or new issues emerge. But right now, I think we have a very good strategy going forth. And I think that Japan helped author our IPS that way. They actually helped us understand what we needed to do in our negotiations that happened before. So hopefully it's win-win. Anything in foreign affairs that is good for Canada should be good for Japan, and good for Japan should be good for Canada. That'll be the success that we try to work on, and hopefully calm down the tensions in our world by showing a little bit of muscle, but not so much that it threatens. That's what that IPS is about, I think.
Yes, and if I may, I would like to add one more element for that. And when we see this action plans, there are so many things about our Canada-Japan bilateral, but so many others for Canada-Japan together to help the countries in need. And today, we see so many elements that divide the world, not unite or disunite or divide. So the issue of the global south is very, very important, because in order for us to see the world united, then there are so many needs that the developing countries have been facing. So development or poverty or food security, energy security, or addressing the global warming. There are so many elements that Canada and Japan can work together to help them. And if we see action plans, there are so many elements which Canada and Japan work together to help those countries that will contribute to unite the world. And especially we get more support and understanding from Global South. And I think in that context, this action plan is so important and significant.
Let me just add to that. Sorry, Valerie, the two of us will just keep talking, but
That's fine.
That makes it a good show. Just an example of that, I was in Sudan a couple of years ago, and we launched with Japan a program, handbook and guidebook around de-radicalization and trying to find ways to work together to ensure that young people had the best future possible. So Canada and Japan worked together on a de-radicalization program, on a pro-youth program in Sudan. That's one example. And in Ethiopia, there's been joint shared projects. And one would not necessarily have thought of Canada and Japan as, partners working in Africa, but we are. Targeted, selective. There's some big players like USAID and the UK, France, but Canada and Japan find a little way to work together on some very important projects. I want more. I think we do best. We're in that field, we're both small countries. And we have large players working in Africa. There's a new scramble for Africa. And I'm not, I don't come at Africa as being against other people. I come at it as being for values and prosperity and equality and democracy. And with Japan, I see us developing an even better future in the global south. I know Africa a little bit more than I know, say, the Asia-Pacific South, the islands, or other areas. But because of our Commonwealth interest in the South Pacific, that may be something also that we should talk to Japan about. And Latin America, because there are strong Japanese roots in South America that I think we can share interests on. Again, most of the illegal migration issues or the insurgency or radicalization is based on lack of economic opportunity. And how we make a fairer, better world is something that Canada and Japan should be working on together. And I think that's the next 10 years. That's our job. I think our former consul general, your former consul general from Toronto, went to Africa, I think to Ethiopia. And, we have
Ambassador
Ito.
Takako Ito, isn't it?
A fantastic partner and friend when she was in Toronto. That relationship that we have, we build those sometimes relationships in Canada or in Ottawa or Tokyo. We build them in our consulates. You have a great consul general here too, as well, still in Toronto. We build those relationships and then we foster them in the global south, which can only help us eventually. Part of it's humanitarian. and making sure that people have prosperity. Part of it's self-interest, because as Africa grows, it'll be the largest market in the world. We want to be there with an emerging middle class, and that will be markets for Japan and Canada together.
You're a very honest person, and I couldn't agree more. And so, if I may, one just suggestion that I just mentioned. I've been talking with my fellow ambassadors and high commissioners from Asian countries. They welcome Canadian Indo-Pacific strategy. And actually, Japan is very vocal to support this Canadian Indo-Pacific strategy, because that is the coincide with our strategy. But we are always talking about Canadian viewpoint and Japanese viewpoint. But so I'm suggesting that why don't we have a seminar like this or in person, inviting the Asian countries to see how they look at this Indo-Pacific strategy by Canada and what is the voices from those countries. So then we could make Canadian Indo-Pacific strategy more meaningful, more relevant to today's world. So that is my ideas. I'm suggesting those ideas to my fellow ambassadors and high commissioners. So I really hope that the Canadian sort of a person like you join that kind of seminar or panel discussion, so that we could discuss how Canada and parenthesis Japan help them to overcome the problems and issues and to make sure that they are prosperous.
I think we can enlist Valerie and NATO Association of Canada and CIC because we have some really important partners in civil society that can foster that. So I'm game. I'm happy to do it. I'm sure Minister Joly would be happy as well.
Thank you very much.
As well as Ian, our ambassador in Tokyo. I think he could be quite engaged in that as well. That he's very, very keen on Canada-Japan relationship and is working very hard. And I think will be a good counterpart to you in your work.
Well, thank you both for that suggestion. And I remind you that this is all being recorded, so it may come back to haunt you at some point when we come to you for support and so on and so forth. And actually, Mr. Oliphant, you jumped ahead of a question that I'd been going to ask you, and this was in the partnership in Africa, because in noting, of course, in your bio, your strong interest in democracy in Africa. And it's my understanding is that Canada have worked with Japan in Africa, but also elsewhere. And seeing that balance is something that I think is very important, both politically, but also economically. And if I could just ask you a very brief, do you see this relationship in Africa able to develop and to grow on these various fronts? And we talked about one of the things that struck me at looking at the 6 priorities is that they can be expanded because they're general enough that any number of things can be applied. And you referred to food security as one that is absolutely critical with droughts in Africa now. And where do you see this going from here?
Absolutely, and I don't think it's optional. One of the things that Japan and Canada share is we were not colonial powers in Africa. So there's a bit of a clean slate for our engagement in Africa compared to some of the other larger countries who have a colonial past. So we come at it a little bit differently than other countries, and we come at it at times. I think that our differences between an Asian culture and a Canadian culture will be helpful. And so sometimes when we're bridging cultural gaps, it's good to already do that with a like-minded partner. Even as we speak, frankly, I am working on the African framework for Canada. So this is a foreign policy framework. We have a well-developed humanitarian and development assistance program in Africa. It's old and it's established and it's always changing. We also have a new strategy that is coming out around economic trade and cooperation, those issues with Minister Ng. She's been charged with that. I'm doing the stuff in between. I'm doing the foreign policy area. And that's about democracy and rule of law. That's about dealing with conflict, post-colonial conflict and reconciliation. That's dealing with the way the continent grows its economic and democratic institutions in a way that will help Africa. It'll be an Africa-driven strategy. I'm working with the AU on that to make sure that they see themselves in the strategy, but it'll be win-win. Obviously, you know, Lagos will be the largest city in the world within a decade and a half or something. I mean, Lagos is growing. Nigeria is a burgeoning population. And it's a young population. I mean, I walk around Canada, and in Japan even more so, we're aging populations. Not us individually, perfectly, we're all getting younger day by day. But as we look around the demographics of our two countries, we're getting older. Our birth rates are low. And if we're going to have economic prosperity, if we're going to be able to keep our social safety nets in place and our social programs in place, we need to develop markets outside of North America. Japan has the same issue. They're an older population. You go to Africa, everyone's young. I have never felt so old in my whole life as when I'm in Africa. Everybody is young. They have a vibrant population, and they need opportunities. And so it's a win-win thing. I see Japan as an economic partner on energy, for instance. You have to have energy and renewable resources to grow an economy. We have skills, capacity, know-how in Japan and Canada around those issues. Food security. Africa can feed itself. There is no reason, even with climate change, Africa can feed itself if we help them get the right resources in the right places at the right times. And this is, again, something that Canada and Japan can work together on. Food security, energy security, developing commercial activity that is for the benefit of African people. Of course, Japanese and Canadian businesses will make money there. We want Canadian and Japanese businesses to make money. That's a good thing. But we also want benefit to happen in Africa. So, you know, we're a mining country. We have extractive resources companies all through Africa. We want to expand beyond that, though, too, and find ways to get into clean energy, clean technology, clean resource development, and good food production. And I see Japan as a good key partner in that, as well as other countries too. I mean, we can look at Sweden, we can look at Norway, we can look at other countries, Australia, and we'll find ways to do it. But Japan, I think, we already have some history with Japan, and I think we can do it even better.
Thank you. I'm impressed by the passion you have about on Africa. And that I hadn't had a chance to work in Africa, but one thing I can tell you about the Japanese government's policy toward Africa is it's about 30 years ago, we have launched our initiative to help African countries called TICAD. That is Tokyo International Conference on African Development that started in 1993. At that time, Japan is the top donors for most of the African countries to support their infrastructures and basic human needs and kind of things. So we have continued work together with African countries to help their development in an appropriate way. So Robert, you just mentioned energy and food and other sort of industries. So that is something we really hope to support African countries. And Africa is a future continent. Huge population, like more than 500 million people living there, and potentially it's huge countries. So now the time for us to work together to help them. But to be very honest with you, and say when we started the TICAD, Japan was the top donors. But now that the position was replaced by China. And we see some of the projects that by Chinese government, then see some problems because the Chinese assistance to those African countries is not based upon the basic rules set by the OECD, partly because China is not a member of OECD. But still, we really hope that those assistance should be placed in an orderly manner based upon those rules. So there now more than ever, there's a chance and opportunity that Canada and Japan, as like-minded countries, work together to help African countries, partly because that is their own right. And also that would be a great opportunity for both of us to get the bigger African markets and good for the opportunities for the African people.
Oh, and I would just add that I was in an African country, I won't say which one, and I drove up to one of their government buildings. It looked like I was in Beijing. It was obviously built by the Chinese. And I talked to the vice president of the country, and we talked about China's role there. And some of it I very much welcome. Obviously, it is helping in some places. However, this vice president said to me, if you go to the buffet and all the food is Chinese, you have to eat Chinese. We want more Canadian food to eat. And I would say we want more sushi in Africa to eat. We want more Japanese food in Africa. So this is something that we are going to have to figure out together. We have to give African leaders more options. We have to give them an idea that their future is better tied to a country that's democratic, that a country that is wanting to have local benefit, not all about external benefit. So I think we can offer that. And the buffet just has to be bigger.
Excellent. I want to carry on with points that you have both made now. And I think it's a subject that we've been avoiding a little bit this afternoon so far, but I think it's very important to get to, and that's the role of China and how the relations with China have been changing. In particular, what I'd like to get your views on what China's actions in the South and East China Seas. Are things like the freedom of navigation and freedom of the seas under threat because of these actions? And what does this mean for, we talk regularly about the rules-based international organization, and Mr. Oliphant, you've already mentioned about the OECD standards not being respected in Africa. But this, in looking at it in the Asia-Pacific region, how do you see this developing in the next little while? And what can we do, Canada and Japan, to counter this? If it is under threat, how do we counter the threat? Perhaps, Ambassador, you could start us off on this one.
Yes, you just mentioned some of the examples that the Chinese actions in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. And people usually sort of last NATO summit, the Prime Minister Kishida mentioned today's Ukraine might be tomorrow's Asia. It's clearly the certain sort of concerns of us. Then if I use the one word, that is the unilateral attempt to change status quo by using its force. And that is not acceptable. So this is something we have to stand, we have to work together. So earlier I mentioned the summit in Hiroshima, G7 summit in Hiroshima. One of the most important, the theme of the summit is to say that this unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force cannot be accepted. We have to uphold, we have to cherish the rule of law. Now, that is a very, very important part. So we need to send a clear message to that. And through those sort of seminars or bilateral discussions or a bunch of the occasion that this unilateral attempt unilateral attempt to change status quo by using force cannot be accepted.
And so I'd just pick up right from there that Canada very much shares Japan's concerns, very much shares their concerns about China's escalatory and really destabilizing actions in the East and South China Seas. And it's important for us to call out China when it engages in actions that digress from international law. These are norms that we have established to keep our world safe and orderly and for the prosperity of everybody. China will tend to ignore them and more. I think it would be safe to say too that probably Canada and Canadians were awoken by the arbitrary detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. We've always been leery about China's activities in the world, but it became very personal for us. Very personal when two Canadians were arbitrarily detained. As we maintained the rule of law in Canada with respect to our extradition responsibilities around Madam Mung, we had 2 Canadians snatched off the streets and taken into arbitrary detention for 1,000 days. And this has disturbed Canada-China relations. Now, the reality is China exists. It is an indisputable fact that China is there, and it is a large economic player, and you don't ignore China. We understand it, but we also stand up to them. We continue to be deeply concerned about China's interference in Canada in a variety of ways, not only election interference, but that, as well as interference with Chinese Canadians and tactics that we find are reprehensible around some Chinese Canadians, and we'll push back on that. But at the same time, I think Canada's role on this is to calm the waters, to try to support constructive efforts to maintain the status quo, say in Taiwan and across the Taiwan Strait, to find ways that the people of Hong Kong are able, even despite Canada's refusal to undertake their responsibilities in that transition, which was to take 50 years, which they've imposed a national security law that we think is counter to their agreements on the transition of Hong Kong. And we're worried about other areas that are interfering in other parts of their neighborhood. So we stand with Japan, we share their concerns, and we'll continue to speak out. I also should note that one of the key factors to the release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor was international solidarity. We had quiet support and out loud support from many countries to work on that. And eventually, I think it became untenable for China to detain those 2 Canadians because there were too many eyes of the world looking at them. And it was a reminder that we're stronger together, that we need to join our eyes together to keep them on China. And I would argue that's in China's best interest too, that the rule of law, international rules-based order will ultimately help China as well. And so we need to convince them of that they do not do well when they're not obeying international law. We'll all do better, including China.
And if I may, I add, I really appreciate the Canadian Indo-Pacific strategy to portray China as an increasingly disruptive global power. That is the very accurate description of today's China. And also I see for Canadian foreign policy, China is a very important sort of element of the independent foreign policy set by the Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in October 1970. Then after half century, the China, the Canada now set its new sort of direction for the policy regarding China. And that is very courageous. And I think that is very, very appropriate for this time of the year. And so I just want to say my appreciation for the Canadian policy toward China. And I think the Canada and Japan work together to compare notes and to share all those details of the elements. Thank you.
You know what I love, Valerie, is the way we complete each other's thoughts. Kenji and I, he'll come up with a thought. I like to complete it. I come up with a thought. He completes it, and you don't see a lot of daylight between those thoughts. And it's that I think even the way we're conversing this afternoon is the way I think our 2 countries are in dialogue with each other. And it's we have a vast distance between our 2 countries, and there are huge cultural differences between the way our countries developed, obviously. However, we've reached this point in 2023 where we have become like-minded, and it's I think through the work of both sides that have continued to do this, and I think the rest of the world benefits when Canada and Japan work well together. I think it is it's an opportunity for the world to both model with other relationships, but also to take advantage of a 1 + 1 = 3 when it gets to Canada and Japan.
Yeah, like a Beatles, 1 + 1 + 1, not 4. It's multiple, like a million. Yeah. And I just have a little disagreement with you because Canada and Japan look like far away, but we are neighbor, separated by the water.
That's right. Absolutely agree. And we share Anne of Green Gables too.
Yeah.
and Beatrix Potter with the UK.
And Beatrix Potter.
Which was one of my Christmas cards one year. I think every Japanese tourist in that part of the world had a picture of my then 2-year-old son in Beatrix Potter's garden, given by the number of photographs that were taken of this little red-headed boy. But I digress. But talk about relationships that are not as happy as the one that, at least from our perspective, is that of the increasingly close relationship between China and Russia. And the other elephant in the room to any discussion these days is the war in Ukraine. Xi Jinping was recently in Russia. The next day, the Japanese, am I right in saying it was either the foreign minister or the prime minister, forgive me, I can't remember which, was in Kyiv. Yes. And therefore—
and also Butch.
Yeah. And, so an indication of how this relationship is seen in Japan. And perhaps I could ask you both to just address, what does the war mean and this deepening relationship between Russia and China mean for both of us, both in the overall world order context, but more specifically in the Indo-Pacific region?
Yes, I just, please, Robert, please.
So I might start, and I'm not an expert on Sino-Russo relations by any means. And this is really Rob speaking more than the government of Canada. I've been very close to watching Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and their aggression. I increasingly see President Putin, as desperate and is being isolated by the people whom he should want to have as friends. Customers for their oil and gas, customers for other products, suppliers of important materials for their economy, regional neighbors even from the former Soviet Union backing away. And I see him as increasingly desperate in his attempt. I think he thought the war would be over very quickly in Ukraine, and he was totally caught off guard by both the resilience and courage of the Ukrainian people, as well as the ability of other countries to support Ukraine in a way that was defensive and could not be accused of being assertive at this point, but defensive. And he was caught off guard. So obviously he reaches out then to friends who are less democratic, less open, less engaged in the world. And as I even watched President Xi's visit to Moscow, I don't think it was an overwhelming success for either of them. I think that it showed there were fractures between the two of them. I expect Putin will continue to be desperate, and I'll expect President Xi to continue to be practical. He will be always trying to find a way to further the interests of China. What I think Western countries need to do is make sure that he recognizes that you want to choose your friends carefully. And I think Canada should be very assertive on that point, to say that that is not an alliance that would further China's interest, because it's with a dangerous partner. And I think Canada needs to find, this is Rob again, not Canada, needs to find a way to encourage China to move away from Russia and embrace the rest of the world. Whether they will or not, I expect Ambassador will have a much better handle on what China is doing there than I do. But as an amateur looking at it, I see desperation and practicality, and I don't see a very, very good visit that the two of them had.
Ambassador.
Thank you. And from the very beginning, the Russian aggression against Ukraine is against the United Nations Charter. This is against international law. This is a clear example that they attempt to change status quo by using force. Because of that, we never accept what Russia is doing today. That's why we do everything we could to diminish Russian power and to support Ukraine. So Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine means a lot. As the G7 chair, he will be hosting the G7 leaders meeting in Hiroshima next month. The Ukraine is no doubt one of the most important issues where the G7 leaders and other guests would discuss to declare the importance of the rule of law in today's world. So, and Japan's been doing the best. We have been sanctioning Russia very seriously, including the financial sanction and also trade sanction and others. And we expelled Russia last year. And so we got a retaliation from them, but we stand tall. And also we've been helping Ukraine very much. Because of our sort of constitution and other legal matters, we could not provide them weapons, but instead we provide them financial support, altogether $7.1 billion support for the Ukrainian people. So that I think the Ukrainian people will continue to stand tall against the aggression from Russia. And talking about Russia and China kind of a marriage of convenience, I'm not quite sure how much they trust each other. But given this geopolitical situation, they work together in many ways. And for example, near Japan, the Russian airplanes and Chinese airplanes flew together to harass our territories. And also they sail together to showing off their kind of the cooperation in terms of military. But we will never be intimidated by those actions. We will stand tall. And also we see their joint action near Alaska or near Arctic area. So now the time for us to stand tall against their kind of the cooperation. We will show our determination to protect the international law, to protect our sovereignty, to protect our territory.
And I would just add that we have been very aware of those joint Air Force patrols, really increasingly over Japan's waters. We share your extreme concerns about those joint China-Russia patrols, but also just want to add, we're also very aware of your Prime Minister Kishida's real leadership in the ASEAN countries, helping them understand the situation and engaging with the ASEAN partners so that they will increasingly be critical of Russia. And I think this is an important role that Japan is. It's an important leadership role that Japan's playing.
Thank you. As a way of conclusion, as we're going to be running out of time shortly, I'm going to put you both on the spot and ask you to, we've talked about a very wide range of topics over the last hour or so, and I'm going to ask you what you would pick out as the one most important area where Canada and Japan could work more closely together to improve the security in the Indo-Pacific area. And Ambassador, if I could point the finger at you, first of all, to start.
You picked the one? And it is very difficult. So I would say two things. One is the business. The other is a consultation between our two countries from the very high to the working level. And the business matters because the private sector makes a big difference. And now we are living in the world, the commitment for the carbon neutral by 2050. So Canada plays a key role for that. And I think that would provide more and more business opportunities for the Canadian companies and Japanese companies. That is great importance for the enhancement of our bilateral relations and also Canada's engagement in Indo-Pacific. And also the government-to-government communication and coordination is so critical. When it comes to the North Korea, or when it comes to China, or when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, all those geopolitical situations, I think the Canadian government and the Canadian sort of militaries and Japanese government and Japanese self-defense forces can work together for the betterment of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'm not going to say, I'm going to take two. I'm going to take one little one, which is totally out of the public eye, but is quite important. and that's the General Security of Information Agreement. And this is something that we are showing we will work together. We want to fast track it. We really want to get this done. And it's on the immediate front. I mean, I think we started yesterday or at the end of the last week. We're getting negotiations around. This is something quite important for us to have a bedrock. But the important thing I think for us going ahead is about our mutual prosperity, is about managing effective international supply chains and trade agreements. I think I'm going to be very direct. Both our relationship with the United States, not lately, but let's say up until a couple of years ago, for about 4 years, I won't mention who the president was, we had a very difficult relationship with the United States on trade. We had to renegotiate NAFTA. We had trade disruptions around softwood lumber, as always, and dairy, and so many areas that, again, and it was probably our 7th wake-up call, but maybe the most profound wake-up call to say we need diversified trade. We need to get rid of our dependence on the United States. It still will be our most important trading partner. We recognize that. But reaching out to Europe through CETA, reaching out through CPTPP to the Asia-Pacific, reaching out bilaterally to Japan. It's no accident that Ian McKay is our ambassador there with a strong business perspective, a strong engagement perspective. The number one thing is our shared prosperity, which will give us, our people, the middle classes of both our societies, the ability to succeed and do well. That will also help fund our ability to have security in the world, and we will continue to do it. So it's business to business ties. It's looking at joint adventures in the world, expanding technology in both places so that we learn from the Japanese, they learn from us. You know, they were early innovators in artificial intelligence. Canada has taken a world leadership in artificial intelligence. Together, these two countries can do something. And I think we become unbeatable then in terms of the marketplace. So I think that's the future. And I think we have the right ambassadors in both countries, and we'll continue to do it.
Well, thank you. That's a very positive note to end this session this afternoon on. And I speak on behalf of the organizers, the NATO Association, and also the Canadian International Council. Thank you both very much for taking the time this afternoon to delve into some of these critical issues, not just as a bilateral relationship, which has grown and got stronger over the years, but also on the multilateral stage. With the number of crises in the world, with everything happening in Europe and what we see in the South China Seas, for example, and economic issues as we come out of the pandemic, and so on and so forth, the list goes on. But it is very encouraging to see two like-minded countries able to work so closely together. We won't always agree on everything. I mean, that's the basis of a good relationship. And so it was very good to see the two of you agreeing and somewhat slightly disagreeing on various points, which bodes very well for the future relationship between our two countries. So thank you very much for this afternoon. This recording will be posted, and we will, if there's feedback from it, we will pass it along to you both. I say that on behalf of volunteering the NATO Association to do that, but thank you very much indeed again. And I wish you a very good rest of the day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert. ありがとうございました。
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.